I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. Do not adjust your sets. It is Sunday. We are coming to you live on the last Sunday of 2024 without an NFL game because we are doing our live league draft, which we will be dropping in on in a little bit. Dennis and I both recovering from respiratory illnesses that have made the first part of the holiday weekend fun. So, you know, we sucked down a little NyQuil or something equivalent. And now we're on live trying to do a draft. What could possibly go wrong, Dennis? What could possibly go wrong?
Man, I'm just excited to be feeling better. And, you know, COVID had me going those first couple days, end of last week. You know, having to miss the show Friday sucked. But, you know, I've gotten a chance to do a lot of sleeping, and so that's been nice. I'm not sure about my first pick. I've made one pick, and I already hate my draft.
Well, you know, what would life be if you didn't already hate your draft? I did not get COVID, although I started to wonder on Friday because you told me about yours, and I'm like, is COVID communicable through a screen? But no, I just got the creeping crud. I knew I was in trouble on Wednesday when I had to go work on the computer for the school nurse in her office. I was like, and she was telling me about all the kids that are out. I thought this was not going to end well for me. And
you're on the clock.
Indeed, it did not end well for me. Well, you know, someone who it did end well for is Brandon Ayuk, who ended a months-long kind of standoff with his team by getting a fat new 4-year contract. Dennis, what do you think of the contract? And also, it was not a great weekend altogether for the 49ers as rookie wide receiver Ricky Pearsall was shot in the chest yesterday. So I'm sure they're glad they got Ayuk's deal resolved, but that has to be something of a blow, right?
Yeah, they were. I mean, Pearsall was already, his status was a bit tenuous with the shoulder, and so they were kind of slow walking him. It felt like a classic non-Lynch negotiation. And then we find out it was the same contract they'd offered him several weeks ago. They basically just said, look, and, you know, the teams that wanted to trade for him, he didn't want to go to. And I think they'd have been willing to make a trade, but he really didn't want to go to those teams. I think he's going to be best served in San Francisco. And while it does, I don't want to say cap his ceiling, it gives him a little trim, takes a little bit off the top. So it's kind of like, what do they call it in the game business? You know, the juice, the vig, you know, it's kind of pulls a little bit of that out of the pay there. So I don't mind.
You're back up, by the way.
Staying. I'm okay with him. Well, you know what? Looks like we're going to be playing chicken. So I'm happy he's staying. I like that situation better than Cleveland or better than Pittsburgh for sure, or New England.
So on to the last wide receiver kind of standing that needs a contract, which is Jamar Chase, who you ironically just took to your team in round 2 here. When they interviewed his coach last week, he said, well, he'll be in practice all week and he'll be on the field. And he was physically present at practice, but wasn't always a participant. Some weird energy going on in Cincinnati. What else is new? Do you have any concerns?
No, I think they get it done. It's the season's going to roll around. He may hold out for a couple games, but I think him and Joe Burrow will get it figured out with the Browns and Katie Blackburn, and they'll get it signed, and he'll be in camp, and they're going to be a pass heavy team. Oh, look at Cole acting just like Dad. I think that I think Chase is going to be in Cincinnati long term. They're going to get a deal done. It'll be just fine.
Certainly would be the hope. Some other curious news. Sean McVay coming out unprompted saying they wanted to use Kyron Williams to return punts. That seems dicey to me. How are you feeling about that?
Well, Kansas City does stuff like that with Isaiah Pacheco, or they did early on. I think they're looking at how can we get our best players the ball in their hand the most times. And I don't know that returning punts is probably ideal, but I think they probably feel like they want to they recognize he's a 199-pound running back and that they can't keep giving him 25 carries a game. And they drafted Blake Corum to help alleviate that. And so this is going to be, well, we want to still get Kyron touches in space because he's good in space. So if we can get him 2 or 3 additional touches in this way where he may not be getting hit quite as much, that may be beneficial to us as a team.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I still like Kyron Williams, but it definitely made me a little nervous, the idea of him returning punts. Probably the last quarterback competition we had going on, we had 2 quarterback competitions that came to a close. Russell Wilson announced as the starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers, while Jacoby Brissett will be the Week 1 starter for the New England Patriots. I don't know how you feel about either of these. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't think either of those guys will be the starter all season long for their respective teams.
Yeah, and I think Drake May probably gets his shot earlier. Interesting that they went that route because Gerard Mayo came right out and said Drake May outplayed Jacoby Brissett in the preseason. But we got to take into account, since he's been drafted and, the body of work that Jacoby's put together versus the body. Yeah, no, your team's not going anywhere. They should be playing Drake May. But also, I'm okay putting the veteran in while they figure out if the offensive line is any good. We've seen it numerous times where they take a rookie quarterback, they put him in from day one because you got to get the reps, but the offensive line is so bad that by the time the quarterback's got enough reps, he's broken. He doesn't have any confidence. He's not making good decisions. There's not a heck of a lot that can be done.
Yeah, I mean, the body of work, I guess if you're talking about NFL career, I understand. But if you were even just talking about the preseason, Jacoby Brissett didn't look great. The Patriots have not a terrible, but not an easy schedule to start out. I guess we will see, how they put things together. It wasn't a complete surprise that they're starting with Jacoby Brissett. It feels like that's the way they wanted to go when they went into the preseason. It was just how well Drake May played that I think had people a moment of pause. I think the same thing about the Steelers. It feels like Russell Wilson's where they've wanted to go since they signed him. We'll see how it pans out. I think at some point we're seeing Justin Fields, and I think we're definitely seeing Drake May. And I don't know if either of these teams can be a playoff team. So.
Well, I think Tomlin will be stubborn in his desire to stick with the more veteran. He just, he marches to his own drum. He's got job security, unlike most NFL coaches, and so he feels like he can take the time to get it right.
Let's talk a little bit of roster news. Cut down day, we always see the guys that are going to be out. So we had a few guys that were put on season-ending IR. A mild surprise to see A.J. Dillon go for the Packers, Elijah Mitchell for the 49ers, Jelani Woods going again on IR. A lot of promise and potential as a tight end for the Colts. We just haven't seen him on there. And then several guys going to PUP. Also not a big surprise. TJ Hawkinson, Jonathan Brooks, Kendrick Bourne, Odell Beckham Jr., Tyler Higbee among those starting on PUP. What do you make of some of this injury news?
I think the A.J. Dillon news is great for what's his name? Not
Wilson.
Lloyd, not Marshawn Lloyd. The other
Wilson.
Emmanuel Wilson.
He's not actually a rookie. I think he's year 2.
Correct. He's looked very good when he's had a chance to get the ball, and so I'm interested to see what happens with Emmanuel Wilson as they go forward in Green Bay. I think the plan right now is to ride Josh Jacobs. We know Jacobs is a 3-down back. It's a team with they may have, for not having a superstar wide receiver, they may have one of the best top 6 wide receiver groups in the league. It feels like with after Watson and Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs, they've got Dontavian Wicks, Bo Melton, and I forget who the other guy they have there is. They've got 6 wide receivers that seem to step up and fit that. They fit that team and what they're doing. Uh-oh, what'd Cole do? He just got auto-picked. They ended up, Marshawn Lloyd is a little bit dinged up, and so I think Wilson's going to look real good there. I got distracted with the draft, so I forget the other things.
Yeah, I think we knew Hawkinson and Higbee were going to miss some time on PUP 2. OBJ will be kind of interesting to see, what he offers when he comes back. Jonathan Brooks is probably the one we're most waiting on for fantasy, kind of like Nick Chubb. Not a shock that he ended up on PUP. I think that's good for Chuba Hubbard at the outset of the season, but I thought Chuba would probably be the lead guy for the beginning of the season anyway. I kind of feel by the time we hit November, Brooks would probably be the guy back there.
I don't know if Hubbard is playing well. I don't know that they necessarily try to let Brooks get established. I think they may, ride Hubbard as long as they can, ease the workload a little bit because it'll be later in the season. But I think that moving on is definitely in the cards. But I think when Brooks comes back, they'll be willing to let him go unless he starts popping off and doing stuff like, Devon A-Chain did, and some of these guys that come in smoking hot.
Yeah, and I think it'll also depend on how Carolina's doing and how Chuba is doing back there, if they've gotten anything from Miles Sanders. We did have a few veterans moving teams during the cutdown process. I'm going to read a list of guys who moved on, most of these signing to practice squads with the potential to be elevated. Let me know if any of these kind of spark an interest. The Lions signed Tim Patrick, gives them some depth there at wide receiver. The Cowboys brought in Dalvin Cook to add to the backfield. And if you were believing social media, it was like having Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott on the same team in 2008. That was kind of the level of excitement there, or 2000. I guess that's too far back. Maybe like 2014. Bailey Zappi went to the Chiefs, probably stay on the practice squad there. Boston Scott, I was kind of surprised he got released by the Rams, but ends up going to the Steelers. Samaje Perine ends up going to the Chiefs. Donald Parham joined the practice squad for the Denver Broncos. Hassan Haskins over to the practice squad for the Chargers. Noah Brown actually just went on to the active roster for the Commanders. And the Chargers, interestingly enough, trade with the Falcons to acquire Taylor Heineke as a backup quarterback.
So I like the Hassan Haskins signing a lot because he's a big back that Harbaugh is familiar with. So God bless J.K. Dobbins. He's a Buckeye, and I love him. He's coming back off another injury. He just hasn't been able to hold it together. The third back is Kamani Vidal. There is a potential for Haskins to earn some early down work. Now he's kind of dollar store Gus Edwards, so maybe he ends up being just a handcuff there. But we've seen Gus Edwards, kind of be injured a little bit. I love Tim Patrick to Detroit because we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years that Denver believed in Tim Patrick over a couple administrations. Unfortunately, he kept getting hurt. Detroit has a need for a third wide receiver, somebody at an intermediate level, big-bodied, can get down the field a little bit, but doesn't have to be fast like Jameson Williams. But my concern is how much has these 2 years of leg injuries sapped what speed he had? Will he be able to get back close to 100%? I'm hoping yes. It's interesting. Basically, Josh Reynolds went to Denver and Tim Patrick went to Detroit. So it's almost like why don't they trade? But I could hear Jackie in the next room going, "You took Aaron Rodgers." Anyways, saying that to Cole. So I do like the Tim Patrick. Give me a few words while I relist them.
Yeah, so Patrick Noah Brown went to the Commanders.
Yep,
Your boy
like
Donald Parham to the Broncos. Samaje Perine to the Chiefs. Those
are the two I wanted. So Parham, does that not scream Jimmy Graham? Let's see.
I doubt he ever sees the active roster.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But, 6'7", very Jimmy Grahamish. Let's see what Sean Payton can do. He wants to relive his glory days. He's got a guy there. And I like the Samaje Perine signing a lot. I know Carson Steele flashed a lot in preseason, but I don't know what to make of that for the Chiefs. And Samaje Perine seems like if Pacheco can't handle the passing down work, he's going to be right there to become a slower Jerick McKinnon.
Yeah, I think Parham to me felt a little bit of a hedge against Dulcich being injured, because I think if Dulcich, they like Kroll too, and they have Adam Troutman. I just don't, unless Parham's coming on to be more of a blocking tight end, I don't really know that there's an obvious place for him.
At 6'7", 237, he's not your prototypical blocker.
No. which is why I think it's a hedge, really, because they have another tight end prospect that they put on the practice squad too, and they also have Nate Adkins. So they have 4 tight ends on the roster and 2 on the practice squad. I think it's just if there's an injury or they lose something or it doesn't pan out like how they were hoping, but we'll see. So that'll do it for those pieces of news. Before we dive into the draft, we did get a question, somebody asking us to take a look at their team. It looks like it was a 10-team PPR league. I'm guessing just one quarterback. Josh Allen, that I'm guessing at quarterback, Jefferson, Drake London, Waddle, Diggs, Sutton, Lad McConkey, and Shakir, and Christian Watson at receiver. Running backs, Barkley, Connor, Ramondre Stevenson, and Dowdle, and grabbed Njoku at tight end.
So the first thing that jumps out to me that makes me really nervous is, as much as I love David Njoku, his connection with Deshaun Watson didn't seem to develop quite like you would like to see. I mean, Flacco wore him out. So that makes me a little bit nervous. I like the wide receiver group. Diggs is my wide receiver 4. I could hang with that. Barkley, Connor, Ramondre, Dowdle. I would maybe try to move a depth piece from the wide receiver group to upgrade Dowdle. But Ramondre feels like he's being very underrated. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't mind the running backs, but there is obviously some injury risk. All 3 of those guys at the top there have missed time from time to time. I think the tough thing too, usually in a 10-team league, is across the starting lineups. A lot of them are pretty good. You get a little bit of an advantage maybe if Allen ends up being QB1 again. But Jefferson, London, Waddle, that gives you good starters. Diggs, Sutton. Then you have a couple of guys you have to see how they develop and what their role ends up being in McConkey, Shakir. Christian Watson could be a huge boom bust guy. So some good depth there. I still like Njoku. You and I talked about this a little bit. He actually had a couple of good games with Watson, but who knows what we have in Watson in general. That seems to be the consensus going into camp. It was weird that they kept 4 quarterbacks. Then, of course, they dropped down to 3 again. But, there hasn't been a real firm vote of confidence that Watson is healthy and looking to start the season. And with kind of an intriguing running back situation, I know we talked about when they dropped down and only kept 2 backs, it's because, they were looking at picking somebody else up, but I haven't seen them get anyone yet. So be interesting to see how that plays out for the Browns in general. Probably one of the toughest teams to read going into the season. We got another quick question. Dynasty trade: Jerome Ford, George Kittle, David Montgomery, and T. Higgins for Breece Hall.
You traded all 4 of those for Breece Hall?
Yep.
I'm down. I love Montgomery and Higgins. I don't expect a ton out of Jerome Ford. I just traded away George Kittle myself in a dynasty. I traded him for. See, it was yesterday, and so I'm still COVID foggy, as you can tell. But let's see. What did I trade him for? Michael Wilson, Theo Johnson, and a 4th-round pick. So I'm betting on Johnson developing and Michael Wilson. I went for Watson. He had offered John. I went for Wilson, and he had offered somebody else. Or I went for Watson. He offered, I don't remember who he offered, but it wasn't anybody I was interested in. So I'm happy. It's a rebuilding team. I already have 4 first-round picks next year. So getting a 31-year-old, somewhat injury-prone tight end off my roster was a good move for me. So I like the move there. I think if you've got that depth to trade away to go for an elite piece like that, I'm going to guess it's an all-in move to go for the title.
Yeah, and I like Brees Hall. I think he's in for a good year. Certainly gives a real top-end score there. And the Jets, they're definitely all in on this year, so they're hoping he has a good year as well. Well, let's take a look at our draft board, which is ongoing. And we'll drop this one all the way across. So, Dennis, why don't you let me know? We kicked off Patrick Mahomes, then Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, C.J. Stroud, 5 quarterbacks in a row. Any surprises there?
No. I think in a super flex league, what do we have? 7 quarterbacks in the first round. I think that's pretty typical. It wouldn't have surprised me if an 8th had went. I know a lot of people are grabbing Jaden Daniels higher in the industry. He actually lasted later in this league. But I think that's starting off hot like that. I wouldn't have been surprised if somebody in the first 5 picks went McCaffrey or Jefferson or Lamb or Tyreek. But I think these are pretty much the top 5 quarterbacks right now. And, I think Kyler Murray is knocking on that door. So I think it's pretty good, a pretty good start.
Yeah, and then you mentioned Jefferson, McCaffrey, Lamb. That is, of course, the next 3 that go. You took Lamb. It seemed like as we were kicking off the show, you had just made that pick. You were having some doubts. What made you pick him, and kind of what?
I because it is super flex, I was really leaning heavily towards going quarterback. And ultimately, when I looked at the guys that were there at quarterback, I just couldn't take any of them over CeeDee Lamb. And, right now, I didn't take my first quarterback till the 3rd round. We'll see what happens, how the rest of the draft plays out for me. But it feels like I'm going to be chasing quarterback the rest of the draft.
Yeah, I waited too. So our next picks, we had Anthony Richardson, then Kyler Murray. I'm interested that you think Murray is kind of knocking on that top level door. That feels too early for me. I have both Richardson and Murray down more in the 12 to 14 range. But then I decided to take a receiver too. I took Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then David behind me took Tyreek Hill. So what do you think of the end of the first round?
I love the upside of Richardson. I'm scared of the floor. We've seen him be great and awful in the same quarter in preseason. So that does make me a little bit nervous. I'm a noted Kyler Murray hater. I have never been a Kyler Murray guy. But this year, I'm kind of into him. It just feels like it's going to – and it might be my scarlet-colored glasses and the fact that they drafted Marvin Harrison. But Trey McBride looked so good last year. Trey Benson looks great. I know that James Conner is going to be the starter there. But when Conner starts to break down, Benson's going to be there to step in. And I don't think they miss a beat. They've got a couple other backup running backs that are serviceable. I think we then end up with Dortch, Wilson, Zay Jones will come back after 5 games. So I think they have reasonably good depth at the wide receiver position. And I just think that's going to suit Murray. I still hold on to these never had a 4,000-yard season stat, which you've pointed out to me over the last couple of years. But you've since noted after last year that if he hadn't missed a couple games, he would have had his first 4,000 yard season.
Well,
So,
and you have
and
to
he's
wonder
not-
if changing coordinators helped. So now I apply my never had a 4,000 yard season to where Cliff Kingsbury went with Jaden Daniels in Washington, and all the people that think that he's just going to explode. He might be real fantasy relevant due to his running. Murray, sometimes it's the player, sometimes it's a combination of the player and the scheme, and it certainly looked like when he came back at the end of last year that he, it was a little more pass friendly, maybe also coming off of a knee injury, doesn't want to run as much, and now you add Marvin Harrison Jr. to the mix, so you could get your first 4,000 yard season.
Yeah, so I'm good with Murray. Like I said, I don't think he's in that top tier. I think he's right on the edge and making the push. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Tyreek Hill, I think those are both great picks for late in the first round. I think they're both going to put – I mean, in one QB leagues, people are making the argument for Tyreek Hill as, the 102. So it's getting him at what it would have conceivably been the 105. I think that's a bargain.
So we go down to the second round, and a lot of running backs to kick off. Bijan Robinson going first, and then Jahmyr Gibbs, then Breece Hall. What do you think of those running back selections?
That's kind of I think Breece probably, Breece, Gibbs, and Robinson, they're filling out that next tier after Christian McCaffrey, and you can kind of juggle them in just about any order that you want. So I don't have it. To me, it's a personal preference, and depending on how many leagues I'm in and how many times I've picked there, I would portfolio those three guys and just kind of spread it out amongst them. I think they're all going to have fantastic years. Breece Hall has probably the least amount of competition for touches in his backfield, but we've seen Jahmyr Gibbs perform with David Montgomery having a great year last year, and it feels like Gibbs is going to have more opportunity this year. And, we're all in on Bijan Robinson getting all of the touches now in Atlanta, despite our guy Tyler Algier still being there. So I think those guys are right on target.
Then John grabbed Dak Prescott, giving him an Anthony Richardson Dak Prescott stack, and you went and grabbed Jamar Chase. So feeling pretty good about the wide receiver stack?
No, because I really wanted a quarterback early, but I didn't like the quarterbacks that were there. And then when I did pick Lamb, I was really hoping for Dak to fall to me, and I was going to go Prescott there. But with Chase on the board, he's just so good. And the running game is not going to be what it was last year. So I'm expecting more passing out of Cincinnati. I don't think Andre Iosivas I don't think he's at the level of Tyler Boyd. T. Higgins, he's going to play his butt off because he's on the franchise tag. So it feels like a very narrow funnel in Cincinnati. But with Chase's situation right now, if he kind of dicks around and starts the season on the bench because he's still negotiating, that's gonna give me some pause, and I think it's gonna be fine in the long run, but it could be a complete train wreck for me.
Well, the next two guys also did stacks. Just Josh stacking Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley to give a pretty good starting running back group. And Cole stacking Garrett Wilson along with Justin Jefferson, starting with a couple of receivers. Then we saw another receiver, Olave and A.J. Brown go. And then Sloopy Lou stacking a couple of quarterbacks there with Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, and then we rounded out with Isaiah Pacheco and Jonathan Taylor. What do you think of the rest of round 2?
I'm not sure I'm sold on Isaiah Pacheco as RB6. The talk is there, but it's going to be one of those situations that we have to figure out, like, are they really going to stick to the plan? And then can he hold up? I know he's a 211-pounder, but he runs so hard and so physical, and he seeks out contact. And that feels like it's going to put him in a position where he could end up missing time and not really being as productive as his draft capital. So that makes me nervous a bit. But also, you got to take your shots when you see your guy. And, like, we had 4 running backs go after the Pacheco pick, and I don't know that Pacheco would have been there when that came back on the 3rd-round reversal. The stretch of running backs, I'm cooling off on Nakua because of Cooper Kupp's health. That's given me a little more pause because if he's healthy, then I think we end up having a little bit more of a even it caps the target number some, and I think that could keep the numbers down for Puka Nakua.
Yeah, and then so you mentioned we do have the 3rd-round reversal, so it goes back, and Devon Achan coming. So David actually goes 3 rounds, no quarterback. I grabbed my first quarterback in round 3, Jared Goff. Then Jaden Daniels goes right behind me. Derrick Henry, kind of probably an underrated pick there, has a chance in that Baltimore offense to put up a lot. And they got to you, and you went your first quarterback of Jordan Love. So talk to me a little bit about starting off the 3rd round.
Well, before I do that, when you went Goff, were you looking at pairing him, stacking him with Gibbs and St. Brown? Was that conscious there?
I did do St. Brown and Gibbs, but it was when I came back, I looked at the quarterbacks that were available. And so, yes,
it's almost like you're drafting as my spirit animal there.
It's almost like I'm drafting a lot of players out of the team that I picked to win the Super Bowl.
So, like I said, I wanted to go quarterback in the 1st round, but I didn't like the value in the 1st. Oh, am I on the clock?
No, Andrew's on the clock.
I didn't like the value of the quarterbacks in the 1st, and then I got sniped on Prescott in the 2nd, and I just didn't want to go Burrow at that point. Jordan Love, he's a mobile quarterback. He can run some. He's settled into that offense. He's got a great group of receivers. They added some offensive line help. They added a workhorse running back to the mix. And so I'm expecting Love to take another step in his maturity this year. So I like Jordan Love a lot. And in a super flex as my first quarterback, waiting until the 3rd round and then getting a quarterback that has that kind of mobility and that kind of connection with his passing game, I'm down for it.
So then the rest of the 3rd round after Love, Puka Nakua, who you kind of touched on there, then Marvin Harrison Jr. goes, giving a pretty awesome 3 wide receiver stack there for Cole. Then Deebo Samuel goes, Travis Kelce, our first tight end off the board, then Travis Etienne, and then the round ends with Brock Purdy and Tua Tagovailoa, bringing a few more quarterbacks in there. But what stands out to you about some of the picks and strategies to end the 3rd round?
I think it's still pretty standard for Travis Kelce to go 1. I think tight end 1. I think we're looking at some we can see his sunset coming in a couple seasons, but I still think that he's still the guy there. He's still going to be the number 1 passing asset, and him and Mahomes are still going to do what they do. Honestly, I was surprised Beth didn't go with Kelsey at the 212 because she picked Mahomes in the first. But I think it's pretty consistent for him to be going as the tight end one. Elsewhere, we're starting to see teams, declare a strategy. Some are going 0 running back. Cole didn't pick his first running back till round 6. Some teams are waiting. I mean, we're still seeing elite tight ends going in the 5th and 6th round. It's been a good draft.
Yeah, so in the 4th round, Jerome Ford goes first, then Drake London, Michael Pittman, Brandon Ayuk. Then we get a run of quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins, and then Aaron Rodgers and Justin Herbert. Rodgers and Herbert going there are the first quarterbacks for their respective team. Cole had 3 receivers to start, then went with Rodgers, gets that Rodgers, Garrett Wilson stack. Just Josh went with 2 running backs, then a receiver, and then Justin Herbert. What do you think of those guys as QB1 options?
I'm more comfortable with Herbert as my QB1. Rodgers is definitely a guy that could put up top 12 QB numbers. And, he's gotten where he's kind of out there. He's gotten injured. He says and does some stuff. And it almost feels like he could go Antonio Brown at any time. He could just, throw an interception, walk over to the sideline, take off his shoulder pads, flip the crowd off as he's walking out the end zone. And nobody would be surprised at that. I think we're hanging a lot on Herbert not throwing the ball as much under Harbaugh. But I still think he's going to be a pretty productive quarterback. And like in Josh's case with Herbert, he went fairly robust at running back with McCaffrey and Barkley. So he's expecting to make up the difference there. Cole going Jefferson, Wilson, Harrison. I think he's expecting to make up some ground there, but Rodgers, Garrett Wilson stack could turn out to be really, really productive.
Yeah, it is always kind of nice when you can stack players, especially if it ends up being a productive offense. So after Herbert, it came back to you, and you managed to get one of your Lions. So I didn't get them all. You got Sam Laporta. You feeling pretty pumped about that?
Yeah, the biggest fear I have with Laporta is that we've seen his best year by 25%, and that going forward, he's just going to be a really good tight end. Maybe he turns into George Kittle and has some great games, or, I don't think I'm not going to say gets injury bug, but, he's only done it. He's going into his 2nd year. He's only done it for 1 year. Theoretically, it should be that, well, he did it and he'll keep doing it. So, but sitting there, I love Mark Andrews. He was a guy that I considered. I love Trey McBride. I love Kyle Pitts. These were all guys that I would have felt comfortable taking there. But I think Laporta was the move.
Then after that, John grabs Rachaad White, so started 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, kind of interesting. DK Metcalf goes. I took Devontae Adams. I don't love the quarterback situation, but I think he's shown that he can produce. He had a heck of a season last year and had pretty much Jimmy G and Aiden O'Connell throwing to him. So Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell combination, probably not any worse. And then Caleb Williams becomes David's first quarterback off the board there at the end of the 4th round. So what were your thoughts to end the 4th round?
I considered Caleb Williams when I took Laporta, but I just wasn't ready to go 2 quarterbacks. I didn't want to go back to back. Rashad White's a guy that put up big numbers last year on very inefficient touches with his touches, but he got the volume. Bucky Irving's been making some noise there. I saw somebody post on Twitter that Bucky Irving was going to be this year's Kyron Williams. And so I don't know if that meant like he's going to come out of nowhere and be a top 5 running back, or if it meant he was going to, put on IR for most of the season and miss a bunch of time.
Well, that was the thing. I think Kyron was on like the practice squad his entire rookie year. He didn't come.
He was on IR. He got dinged up, and they just put him on IR.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how it all pans out. We are making our way through the 10th round, coming to the turn. So why don't you start looking at some of these teams and tell me what you think about how they are getting constructed. We have an 18-round draft, so we're about halfway home.
All right. Well, I'm on the clock, and let me go ahead and make my pick.
Better be a good one.
It's a great one. So as far as so I love what Cole is doing out of the 6 hole. After last year's debacle, the only concern I have is he doesn't have a second quarterback. And there's not going to be a lot to pick from. So, but he's got Jefferson, Wilson, Harrison, JSN, Jamison Williams, and Jerry Jeudy as his wide receiver core, with Kenneth Walker and Raheem Mostert. So there's definitely a couple guys that he's going to want to target to kind of support that team. Aaron Rodgers as a solo quarterback and Mark Andrews as a tight end, he's going to need to grab – we're in the quarterback area now where he's going to need to grab at least 2 quarterbacks to make this team work. Looking at, let's see, Sloopy Lou starting out, with ETN and Swift as his running backs and going quarterback. That one, he's got 2 great quarterbacks that are going to be very productive, but I just am not sure that a wide receiver core of Pittman, Neighbors, Odunze, Keon Coleman, and Watson, that feels pretty risky to me. If it pays off, it's going to be phenomenal. I like the way that David at the 112 went with Hill, Robinson, and Achane before he went quarterback. That's one of those things about picking on the turn when you can do that. And sometimes, maybe you're reaching for a guy, but the picks aren't coming back to you for 20 picks. So you want to go ahead and make sure you get the guys that you want. I'll let you include your team when you start talking about the teams you like here.
Yeah, I just jacked up. I was going to pick and hit the wrong button. Oh, Gus Edwards. Why? I started with St. Brown and Gibbs. I liked having that stack. Honestly, though, we were going back and forth, and I'll be honest, I did not realize Breece Hall was still there, so I probably would have taken Breece Hall. Then I grabbed Goff. Took Adams when he came up. I like James Cook. I liked what we saw from him in the offense once they switched over to Joe Brady, and I think that's kind of more of where they want to go. I think Ray Davis and Ty Johnson are fine, but neither of them strikes me as a guy that's really going to challenge Cook for what he was doing there last year. So I like the potential there. Then I ended up grabbing a couple of young quarterback prospects to give me options at Superflex. I took Bryce Young in the 6th. I went back and took Bo Nix in the 9th round. Obviously not starting quarterbacks by the time you and I took a quarterback, and then, I took some position players. By the time you get down to the 6th round, I was kind of looking at where we were at, and I didn't feel a strong desire to go with some of the veterans. I'm not a big Will Levis believer, so I think Bryce Young wasn't great as a rookie, but wasn't maybe as bad as some people thought. And I'm curious to see what Dave Canales can do for him. The last two quarterbacks he worked with were guys that there were a lot of questions about that both came out and put up top 10 QB seasons. I don't know if we'll get there totally with Bryce Young, but I'm curious to see that growth. I grabbed Evan Ingram as my tight end. That was kind of the last of a group of high scoring tight ends. Ingram led them in targets and receptions last year. You actually just took the running back I meant to take when I took Gus Edwards. But I think Ingram might be the piece of the Jacksonville passing game that I like the best. So I have enjoyed picking him up where I can, because you don't have to pay quite the premium you pay for some other tight ends. But he was tight end 2 last year, caught 93 passes, saw 114 targets. I like the potential there. Chris Godwin, maybe it's hanging out too much with you, but I've come around a little bit more on him, so I grabbed him. Romeo Doubs, a receiver that I like in Green Bay. There's a lot of talk that he might be kind of their wide receiver 1 in terms of targets. So trying to give myself some good options and depth now going through. And then I ended up with Gus. It's not terrible. I would have taken Singletary. That's who I was trying to take when I jumped to the button, apparently. But Edwards probably will be the lead back there for the Chargers, at least for the time being. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, I think, it's funny because like last year we had some people that were playing really for the first time, and a couple of them are back this year, and they're doing very well. Cole, Smog the Dog, I think he's doing well. Beth, Trash Talkers, current count, we've got 1. So, dang, we're in the 11th round, and Beth has only drafted 1 Cleveland Brown. That's amazing.
And not a bad one either, because Jerome Ford can be the lead back for quite a while.
Yep. So I think it's great because, like, what we want to do is we want to help people learn how to play fantasy football and kind of get into the game like we do and have fun and, maybe start leagues of their own. And with Beth and Jackie and Cole and I, it's a family league to us. Well, it's our show league. We all we all are kind of taking turns ragging on each other. And something tells me Beth hasn't figured out this whole picking it to turn, because she keeps getting auto picked. Oh, maybe she's not even on the clock right. Or I wonder if she set a cue because it didn't put her on auto. All right. Good girl then. Way to go. So she's learning.
Yeah, we got Brian Thomas there.
I considered Thomas when I took Singletary. I was looking real hard at him.
Well, and I like the Nico Collins, DJ Moore. That'll be a pretty successful wide receiver grouping, I think, too. Your wife obviously was the champion last year with Stroud, Cousins, a couple of good scoring quarterbacks, Olave, Debo, T. Higgins, Jaden Reed. I liked that pick a lot. Sutton, a good group there. Running back, probably, maybe get a couple of lottery picks down here. Jones, going to be the leader for the Vikings when he's out there. I was higher on Tony Pollard than you, and then Austin Eckler certainly seems like they're going to try to run the ball a lot for the Commanders. So coming together.
Yeah, it's I was surprised. Like, I wasn't high on Chris Rodriguez coming out last year, but I was surprised they cut him this year because I felt like he performed really well.
Yeah, there's been some. Well, I think sometimes too, it's changing administrations and schemes. Did he perhaps fit what they were trying to do last year better than what they're trying to do this year, a whole new coaching staff there, a whole new offensive coaching staff. The one to me that's going to be the most frustrating the last couple of years coming out is Kendre Miller, because we had a lot of high hopes when he got taken by New Orleans. It seemed like he had a golden opportunity last year to potentially step in while Kamara was going to be suspended, but he couldn't be healthy enough to get on the field. It seems like he still isn't healthy, and worse than that, some real unflattering comments continually made by Dennis Allen there. He is on, I believe, short-term IR, designated for return, but I'm starting to wonder if that's going to end up being kind of a lost draft pick.
Yeah, I think, we saw the Rams, cut Zach Evans, and, there were a lot of debates about who's better, Zach Evans or Kendre Miller, and it's kind of turning into neither.
Well, and the big thing, a lot of people thought Zach Evans was going to do what we saw Kyren Williams do last year, but just never broke in. Doesn't seem to be part of their plans. Hey, speaking of Kyren and that offense, how are you feeling about the potential mix of him and Blake Corum?
Not great, Bob. Not great. I'll be honest, my running back group is horrendous. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do. So I'm gonna, it almost feels like, we know McVay likes to bell cow his running back, and it feels like he's gonna, given Kyren punt duties, it may be something where he maybe changes his philosophy and they split a little more, and they don't have that bell cow guy, and that would be, obviously that's taking the talent you have and using it to its skill set. But Blake Corum at 5'9" and 208 pounds is a powerful guy that can run the ball well inside. So I'm interested to see what really happens there. Is it gonna shake out that way? I like what Kyren Williams was doing, but I am nervous about his volume.
Well, yeah, it'll be kind of interesting to see.
Brandon Cooks in the 13th is stealing.
Yeah, I just saw him when I was down there. Well, and this is about the range where I figured it was worth taking a shot on Nick Chubb down in the 12th round. He was actually my number one pick last year. I made it all the way to the championship game before I got crushed. I'm pretty sure I renamed my team Chubb's Broken Wheel after he blew his ACL. And he'll be on PUP to start the season, but I'm not ready to quit him yet. So I figured it was worth a shot with Cook and Gibbs. As long as they stay healthy, and Edwards, I should be fine to weather the first month of the season and then see how things shake out. Felt like a couple of value picks there, maybe. If Chubb ends up being back to Chubb of old down the stretch, that could end up being pretty good for us. Well, we're getting close to the hour mark here. We'll see how the rest of our draft shakes out. But how are you feeling about your team so far?
Not great. I think I've screwed up. I'm going to need some. I'm going to need some miraculous performances from the running back position, I think, to be to get anywhere. So, we'll see how that rolls around. So, anyways, that means now I'm going to take several targets.
That's what you fill the late rounds with, is some running backs and some wide receiver options that may or may not hit. If it doesn't work out for you, you can always cash in on the waiver wire a little bit later. But well, that'll do it for us today. It was fun to be with you here on the last Sunday without football. This time next Sunday, we'll be enthralled in a deep amount of games. Dennis and I will be back on Tuesday with our end of the season award and playoff picks. So that'll be something to look forward to. And then you know what? When we're back on Friday, not only will we have an actual game that counts to talk about from the Thursday premiere, we will actually have a full week 1 slate to be going through and to be picking games. Dennis, I know you're excited about that, but if people have a long and lonely Sunday and Monday while they are off work, what can they do?
They should go to their favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, and type Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. Well, give us a like, give us a subscribe, leave us a rating and a review. We love that.
I like how you're so worried about your running back group that you just went ahead and took another wide receiver.
I didn't like the running backs that were there. I just couldn't bring myself to start reaching.
You're a man who likes to zig when other people zag. You know, what are you going to do? Well, that'll do it for us today. Hope you guys have a safe and happy Labor Day weekend. We will see you on Tuesday with our fearless playoff predictions. Until then, have a